for over 10 years. I started out my career as a prosecutor, and I did that for 6 years. And then I went into insurance defense litigation and did that for 4 years. After 10 years, just in the nuts and bolts of practicing law, litigation, heavy litigation, I decided that I wanted to open up my own firm, to create that generational wealth, number one, and just to talk about a certain type of law that's just so little, but in the event it's big too, because it's called estate planning. So with Shanova talking about financial literacy, how to save money, how to budget, and all that stuff, she's talking about building wealth. With Michelle talking about real estate, investing, getting your own home, she's talking about building wealth. But what people don't understand is you can build it and build it and build it and build it, then what happens? Where does it go? You're building, where does it go? And that's where, if you are really on that mindset of trying to create generational wealth, you can't do it without estate planning. Hence my shirt. Estate planning is generational wealth. That's how you pass down wealth to your children. And so I'm going to go through the problems first to talk about, I'll talk about myself, so we'll go here. Like 3 problems and the 3 myths about the estate planning. So many people pass away without estate planning, right? So why do they pass away without estate planning? It's because they don't have the knowledge of what estate planning is. And when you do pass away without an estate plan, you're allowing the state to make that decision for you. So let's just talk about, you die intestate, that's what it's called. You build up all this wealth. You have house. You have life insurance. There's no beneficiary on it. You have financial accounts. There's no pay on death on it. You have all these wealth, these assets. You pass away, then what happens to them, right? You have children. Who gets your assets? Who gets them? Number one, if you didn't do a financial inventory of your assets, how are your family members going to know what property you have? How are they going to know, what accounts that you have? That's dying intestate and going through the probate process, which takes a long, long, long time. And when you do go through the probate process, you have to file all these documents. You have to have access to the creditors. The creditors can put an interest. Let's just say you owe some money. And I'm going through this probate now with one of my clients where the father he worked at Publix. He left some money. He didn't have a chance to put a beneficiary on it. He had 4 children. So now we have to file these documents, this paperwork in order for the children to benefit from the funds. Guess what we have to do? We have to put a publish in the newspaper to all the creditors to let them know that such and such passed away. So if he owed you money, go ahead and go to the courts and file your interest so you can get some of that money as well too. Like, is that passing down wealth? Where you have to pay those taxes, creditors can get attached to those assets. It's like it's money that's coming out that could have gone to the children. So that's down to without with intestate. So that's the problem. Passing away without a wealth is having to go to the probate court. Now you have another one is generational wealth is rarely explained. So as I talked about it, and Shanova talked about it as well too, when you have generational wealth, when we talk about it, it's just passing down wealth to your children. It's just not the assets as well too. It's your values, it's your stories. It's like, what are you teaching them in order to create that generational wealth? We're building the wealth. What they can leave us is their home. Because when they came into this country, a house is that one asset they know that they can own and they can pass it down to us. So they built that wealth. Now it comes down to us, So with us with me starting a business, building a business, and then for me starting a business, and my kids seeing me how I'm starting a business and how to pass down wealth, you have 70% of the wealth families lose their wealth by 2nd generation. Why is that? It's because there's no financial literacy. There's no financial literacy. So as long as Shanova was saying, like 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, just start talking to your children about, just financial literacy, money, assets, whatever it is, so they can have that knowledge. So when you're building by, having your financial assets, you're building by having your investment property, you're building it while you pass it on to the second generation, your children understands what the wealth is, and it goes down and passed down and passed down. So that's 90%. And then they said 90% by the third generation, I mean, the wealth is gone. So it's gone. So as you can see, like with a lot of these celebrities now, like their first generation having all this money, and you can tell some of them are teaching their kids and some of them are probably not, and they have this money now, but like couple of generations, they're not gonna have that asset anymore because the children hasn't been educated on how to maintain it, to pass it down. So that's the generation wealth is really explained. The next slide is the term estate planning is not commonly understood. So I talked about the wills, the trust, the healthcare directive. So when you talk about estate planning is just like that umbrella. So it's more of getting your assets in order, getting your affairs in order, and in the event that you become incapacitated or you pass away. And underneath that umbrella, you have your wills, you have your trust, you have your healthcare directive, you have your surrogate, you have your power of attorney. The wills and the trust will do the same thing. However, when you have a will, you can still, write it out of who you want your assets to go to, but you have to go through probate. So if it's something that you refuse to go through probate, then wills is not for you. A lot of people say, hey, never get a will, or just only go with the trust. I tell my clients, it all depends on your family dynamic. Who's your beneficiary, your family dynamic. So if you have a family dynamic, it may not require you to have a trust. It may require you to have a will. So when you have a will, it has to go through probate. It takes tons of time. You have to hire an attorney. I mean, just to start off is $2,500, just a down deposit. But then if you have more assets, trying to figure out what those assets are, going in front of a judge, if you have a blended family or there's other family members that's trying to have an interest in your property. If you have an outside relative that you was like, if you were alive and you were like, okay, I'm not gonna leave any money for this person, and they're gonna try to contest it so they can have, some of your assets as well as too. So that's just like going through the wills process.
So like if you, say for instance, you are up and coming future millionaire, like myself, and you don't currently have like a lot of assets, do you go for a will and a trust, or do you just write up a document that's not like, because I don't know when is a good time to do wills and trusts, like at what is it an asset limit, is it a number of property, like?
I'm gonna discuss that.
Okay, perfect.
We don't go there with the myth part. Okay, so then when you have a trust is a document that dictates, what happens to your asset upon the death or income when you become incapacitated. But with the trust is, instead of passing away with everything in your name and having to go through probate so the judge can transfer your assets to your beneficiary, with the trust is going to now own your assets. So if you have a home, instead of the deed is in your name, the deed is into the name of the trust. So the trust now owns the deed, the home. Your bank account, if there's no beneficiary on there, you can have the trust to own the bank account in the event that you pass away. Your life insurance. I always talk about this too. When you have your life insurance, especially if you have minor children, a lot of the times, your spouse will be your first primary, beneficiary, and then the second will be, guess what? It is sometimes it's not the kids. I'll be happier as the kids. So sometimes some people put it for a family member. And I say, no, if you're gonna put in a family member, you might as well put in the kids and just go through probate. Because once you give it to that family member, it's of course for the benefit of the children, but it's now in the hand of that family member and they can do whatever they want to do. So they can say, oh, let me go start this business with this money. I'll pay, the kids, I'll give them something. It's not their money, right? So if you do have minor children, you have life insurance, I honestly, just rethink that, because if you do pass it down to like that family member, it's for the kids, but If you pass it down to the kids, you're still gonna have to go through probate. So that's like a running in itself. But then the court, well, I'm going to college, while everybody else trying to struggle. I was like, no, I'm just gonna ask the trustee for some money because my auntie left me some money in the trust for me, So it's like, it's different things. You can just have that mindset to start thinking about creating that generational wealth. So I have to be rich and have a lot of money is. Okay, myth number 2 is I'm too busy, I don't have enough time. So a lot of people, when I discuss, trust and wills, and especially when I go into the trust, and they're just like, their head is going crazy, and they're just like, this seems too complicated for me, so like, I don't want to talk about it anymore. But you have to talk about it, And the reason why you don't, because a lot of times you're listening on social media, and so they're just saying blanket statements, but they're not following with, some information behind it. So you're like, what do I do? But what you can do is, speak with a qualified estate planning attorney like myself.
Yeah.
I do family wealth session planning all the time, and with my family wealth session plan, we sit there, we discuss. I talk to you about wills, I talk to you about trust, I talk to you about everything that you own, what would you like to do with it, I talk about your family dynamic, do you think that, your family is gonna fight over the funds, so I start talking about all of that. So when you sit down with the qualified estate planning attorney, it makes it more simple for you because we explain the details for you instead of you just listening to social media and just getting that blanket statement and just taking it and running with it. So I'm too busy, I don't have enough time. That's a myth. Just speak with the estate planning attorney and you just get that knowledge out there about it. And then the third myth is I'm too young to start my estate plan. You're never too young. At the age of 18, you are considered an adult, right? So at the age of 18, you're considered an adult. So let's just say you're 18 years old, 19, 20. Now there's this social media influencers, and these 20-year-olds have lots of money because they're posting and everything like that. And I'm sure some of them are not talking about estate planning, especially that rapper that died. That was part of, I don't know, what do you call it? Amigos, yeah. So very young, like what, 20, 28, probably 27, has all this money, and it was mind-blowing to know that you have a manager, like you have all these people around you, nobody told you what to do. Like you're never too young, so it's not about, it's more than that. So if you are 18 or older, you need to have one, point blank. Because what happened was with that rapper, he had all this money, and he did not have an estate plan. So guess what? I believe he didn't have any children. So because he didn't have an estate plan and he didn't have any children, so therefore it's going to go to his parents.
Yeah.
Come to find out, I heard dad was never a part of his life.
Yeah.
So guess who became rich? Daddy, who did nothing for me. Mom, who did everything, so mom get half and dad get half. Dad that did nothing, Yeah. So it's like, it's so important just to put something in place now. So therefore, while you're alive, you get to decide that money that you worked up for, the money that you built, how do you want it to pass it down? So being too young, that's a myth within itself. So it's never too late. And also, when it comes to being incapacitated as well too, because, with COVID, just senseless shootings, at that, with just accidents, we had a family friend whose daughter was incapacitated for the longest. And she was like, 22 years old. And for the parents to get access to any of her information, they had to go get a guardianship because she's 18. They're not gonna talk to them. You can't get their records. You can't get anything, and you have to go do guardianship. And going to guardianship is another process that has to happen as well too. So you have to file that petition and say, hey, my daughter's incapacitated. I need access to her bank account. I need access to this. I need access to that. And so, therefore, that's why I said it's never you have like 18 years and older, like you're an adult, so you need to have one in place just to protect that. And just to end, and just to tie everything together, when we talk about generational wealth, a lot of times, it's been the hot topic since the pandemic, like a hot topic since the pandemic. And we also think, especially people in our community, we think that we can't obtain that generational wealth, but you just have to have that mindset to say, I want to leave a legacy, and this is how I'm going to work to leave that legacy. You know, it doesn't matter how old you are, you know, if you want to start now, you can, you know, just to think about how to leave wealth to the generation, because that's who's going to be taking over. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. And I
need a card.
I have a card over here too. And just to talk a little bit about my business, so what I do is I am on social media as attorney_Philippe, and on my card you have my website here, and then you have the PowerPoint that's there too. It's like a webinar. So what I do with my clients, like I said, I do a financial inventory of their assets. That's the part that I really love to do with my clients, because it's opening your eyes to see what assets you have. You know, what assets do you have? How do you want them to leave it? You know, you're starting to have that mindset to create generational wealth. And like I said, if you're sitting here thinking like I have nothing to leave behind, like let's not start thinking about I have nothing to leave behind. Let's start thinking about, okay, how can I create something to leave behind? You know, let's just look at it that way. And so if you want to contact me, here you go.
I was going to say, add another myth. Financial planning is too expensive. It's expensive at the end when you
Thank you. Yes.
invest now.
Right. So, like Gregory said, that is a myth. It's that it's too expensive for me to get a trust or start an estate plan. No, because once you start and have